Good overnight. Welcome on into another episode of From Day One, the overnight edition. Along for the ride, of course, we'll grab the mailbox first, and it looks like there's only one thing in there, so we'll grab our little heart for 30. Up tonight, Art Bell has his Part 2 interview with the man, the myth, the legend, Neil deGrasse Tyson. Originally airing October 29th, 2015, Neil deGrasse Tyson, scientist and astrophysicist, more commonly known for his being hosting duties on the show The Cosmos, among many, many others. So we now return to where we left them from last night, more of Midnight in the Desert with Art Bell and Neil deGrasse Tyson.
The clock strikes 12, and Midnight in the Desert is pounding packets your way on the Dark Matter Digital Network. To call the show, please direct your finger digits to dial 1-952-225-5278. That's 1-952. Call Art.
It is our honor to have with us tonight Dr. Neil deGrasse Tyson, probably the nation's absolute premier astrophysicist, probably so in the world. And you're not going to want to miss his Star Talk on Sunday, October 25th at 11 p.m. Eastern Time. That's going to be quite a show. Now, I want to jump because I want to talk a little bit about when I was 13 years old, I got my ham license. Then I went into radio. I was deeply into electronics. I loved and still love electronics. I'll be a ham till the day I die, in more ways than one. And it was a wonderful, wonderful time to grow up. I grew up watching the space program. I grew up watching man stand on the moon. I grew up seeing all of that, and it's all, I don't want to say it's all gone, but I don't know. The spirit that America had, what we were, looking to the future the way we did, it's just not the same. Dr. Tyson, would you care to comment on that?
Sure. So what distinguished the 1960s from all times that followed it, and of course the 1960s ended in like 1972, 73, I guess with the end of the Vietnam War and when we stopped going to the moon. Yes. And of course the 60s began when the Beatles appeared on Ed Sullivan. So that's the operational definition of the 1960s. And so in the 60s, every single space mission was more ambitious than the previous one.
Oh, yes.
Because there was a goal set that had not yet been reached. And so Gemini had 2 astronauts and not 1. And each Gemini mission was testing spacewalking and docking and maneuvers that you would need to execute in order to go to the moon. When the last Gemini spacecraft was retired, there was the Apollo spacecraft waiting in the adjacent launch pad, ready to start its rounds of tests, and culminating in, of course, the landing on the moon with the Apollo 11 in July 1969. When you look at modern times, where people are getting excited about the space shuttle or the space station, you're advancing a technological frontier to build a space station the size of a football field orbiting the Earth. Mm-hmm. No doubt about it. But as far as for my money, you're not actually advancing a space frontier. What you're doing is you're boldly going where hundreds have gone before into low Earth orbit. And so that's why people are asserting that, space is just not interesting. Well, it's not interesting because there's not an advancing frontier to garner the headlines, such as what happened in the 1960s.
Nor do they seem willing to admit how many things came out of the space program that we take for granted now.
Yeah, I can't even be. That's a whole other conversation.
It is.
Perhaps the most under-heralded aspect of the space program was the need to miniaturize electronics to save on the weight of the launch vehicles. And so every functioning piece of electronics, from the computers to the communication device, everything, a lot of engineering brain work went in to make them small. And the act of doing so then led Earth people to say, hey, this radio that used to be a piece of furniture in my grandparents' living room, maybe I can fit that on my hip. Clearly, no one in the 1920s was looking at the radio saying, I want to carry that around with me,
right,
and one day I will. No one even knows how to have that thought, because that's not that's not the mindset at the time. So much of what we count as modern access to computing and electronics as being portable are traceable to the trend that was initiated by NASA simply to go into space. And that's not simply a patent. It's not a spin-off in any literal sense. It is a trend in what you needed to do to get the job done, right, and what impact that had on the innovation of everybody else here on Earth.
So what's happened to us? In other words, why can't this case be successfully made to those who hold the purse strings for whatever we want to do?
Well, so I wrote a whole book on this. It was called Space Chronicles: Facing the Ultimate Frontier. And by the way, that book was the title I submitted it with to the publisher was not that title. The title I submitted it with was Failure to Launch: The Dreams and Delusions of Space Enthusiasts. And the salespeople said, "Oh, we can't sell a book that has the word failure in it." And I had a whole argument with them that I lost. Okay, so here's the thing. Many of us who remember the space program, we will recount it as being the deeds of explorers. It's in our DNA. Perhaps not only as a species, but as Americans. Look what we did.
Yes.
And there's a lot of that going around. But consider, we were at war. We were at war with a sworn enemy. Mm-hmm. And in fact, almost every single metric of success in space, we did not win. The Soviets won. They had the first satellite. They had the first non-human animal. They had the first human. They had the first woman. They had the first black person. They had the first space station. They invented the rocket equation that tells us how to actually design rockets to have them launch to go to our destinations. What we did, and they didn't do, we landed on the moon. So we did this one thing, and then we said, we win. But in fact...
Yes, and they now virtually hold the keys to the space station. They're the only ones who can get us up there.
They're the only one. And I used to say that we hitch a ride with them, but in fact, no, we're paying tens of millions of dollars per seat just to get to the space station. So it leads you to wonder, do we need to be at war in order to stimulate a moving frontier in space? Because there is no question that's what stimulated it the first time. And I joke about this. I imagine visiting China and going visiting the head of China and whispering in his ear and saying, I just want you to leak a memo. It doesn't have to be true. Just leak a memo that says you want to put military bases on Mars. And then we would design, fund, build a spacecraft, and launch it. We'd be on Mars in 10 months.
Wonderful.
For sure. And so...
No, that's good. I'd rather not have to go to war to achieve it. But you know what? Right now, if you look at what's going on in the world with Russia and Syria and the proxy wars and all the rest of this baloney, China with their islands, us with sailing by them, we're getting closer to the old Cold War by the minute.
Yeah, that's a scary prospect because things are not becoming less tense. They're becoming, it appears, more tense. And with us putting our warships near the Chinese islands that they're building, in that same article that I read of this was when I learned that the Chinese had put one of their warships off the coast of Alaska when President Obama was visiting Alaska. So it's like tit for tat kind of war games going on. And so I don't know what the long-term future of that is, but maybe the only thing that'll keep us safe is that everybody's in debt to everybody else.
Well, there is that. I guess if we got into a tiff with China, we would suddenly just say, all right, we're keeping our money.
Right. And they don't want that. And so maybe it's the economies that are preventing it. But I have another plan. Listen, I don't want to call it a plan, an idea, I'd rather say.
Okay.
And that is for a nation to grow economically and to maintain a sense of security and health and wealth, it will require innovations. We know this. Innovations in STEM fields, the science, technology, engineering, and math fields. These are the engines of tomorrow's economies. We've known this since the Industrial Revolution and before. So with this, we can pose the question, what is the greatest driver of innovations? And what we have today are people saying, I know what we have to do. Let's create programs that gets kids interested in STEM fields. That'll fix everything. No, it's not. You know why? Because adults outnumber kids 5 to 1, and adults vote, and adults wield resources and funding, and adults are in charge. And if you have scientifically illiterate adults, I'm not waiting around 30 years for the eighth grader to become president and then solve these problems. There's an adult problem, an adult science illiteracy problem that is in the way. So what I would suggest is, if the government says we are going to go into space in a big way, then it becomes highly visible, as going to the moon was highly visible. The government said we're going to put people on Mars, and you know who those astronauts will be? They're in middle school today. Let's select the Mars astronauts today, and it'll be a 50 middle school students from across the country. And Team Beat will follow them, and we're all going to want to know, are they eating their 3 square meals? Are they getting good grades? And we would grow up with them, and they would be the first pioneers to Mars. And to do that, you're going to have to innovate in countless ways to get people to Mars safely and have them return. Plus, you're going to have to use materials on Mars if you're going to spend any time there, unless you send cargo ships in advance. But all of this has never been done before, which means you're going to have to innovate, and that will turn a sleepy nation, a sleepy country, into an innovation nation. And when you're an innovation nation, that you know that there's something cool about innovating. You have the same attitude towards innovation that Elon Musk has, and he wouldn't sit there isolated as a lone genius trying to solve all of our problems, because we'd all be part of that same solution path. So I see space as a force operating on our urges to be innovative, whether or not you are actively engaged in aerospace fields, and that would be transformative of our nation.
Okay. If you were in charge of NASA, and you had lots of money, and you could set the agenda for our next big goal, what would it be?
So that's a great question. So I'm going to I'm going to give you an unorthodox answer first, and then the longer real answer. My unorthodox answer is, I don't want to be head of NASA because the head of NASA reports to the president, but we as citizens, the president reports to us, and so the real power is not in who's head of an agency. The real power is in the electorate. So if the electorate understands the value of this, then they would only elect into office the people who resonate with that valuation. And then you don't have to run to Washington. NASA wouldn't have to run to Washington every 2 years with hat in hand saying, please top up my budget. Those folks would already be in place.
Well, I've been watching these silly debates, and not once have I heard a question about space.
Precisely, or science even. Forget but science or technology, as though this is some optional thing that maybe we'll get to if we have time, when there is no health, wealth, or security without it. So I am astonished that it has not only not been addressed directly by the candidates, the journalists are not going there either. Maybe they think that science is not going to sell in the debate ratings. I don't know. But it's a travesty if we're going to have debates where science is not the theme, at least one of the topics of the debates. Because somebody's got to recognize that there is no modern society as we have come to build it without the contributions of science and technology to it. That's all there. That's pure and simple. Now,
okay, well, here's another mystery you can try and explain. While there's not much interest among the public, or maybe that's wrong, there is. While there's not much money getting poured into it, if any at all, look at Hollywood. That's all they're doing. Did you see The Martian? Great movie, actually.
I think Hollywood is a litmus test for what the appetite that exists for people to want to think about space, to go into space, to dream of it tomorrow. And the great thing about The Martian was science and technology were the themselves characters
Yes.
in that film. My favorite thing to say about The Martian was they had the cliched scene that any astronaut movie is going to have, where one of the astronauts is looking at a video screen of their spouse and their child.
That's right.
Say, when are you coming home? And they touch the screen. When they did that in this film, I'm thinking, could you hurry that up, please? I want to see if the experiment's going to work. And that's normally the most touching scene in any of these other films. And this one, it kind of got in the way because the science and technology was where all the suspense was.
It was great.
Action so now to answer your question, what I think we should do, and I would offer this to people and they can decide for themselves. I don't start movements. I'm not hitting people over the head. I want people to vote freely according to what their own thoughts are, provided they're informed thoughts. So I'm going to give you some information. My sense is that if you set the next goal as a destination, such as Mars, you might get stuck with the moon problem. What was that? It was, we're going to the moon. And then we got to the moon, and then NASA was not designed to do anything else because so much money got pumped in to make that one result happen, that the rest of the solar system laid untouched because it all got focused in a singular goal. What I would suggest is don't even make Mars a singular goal. You say, let us create a suite of launch vehicles that have the capacity, depending on combinations of sort of strap-on boosters, you can go to any destination you want.
Ooh, I like that.
When we built the interstate system for the United States, they didn't say, well, let's just connect L.A. and New York. No, let's build the roads everywhere, because I don't know in advance how creative people want to be in this part of the country versus another. So let us enable all transportation. So if you can do this, then sure, there'll be scientists who want to go to Mars and look for life. There could be miners who want to extract mineral resources from asteroids, and maybe robots will do that first, or people. We might want to put a telescope at one of the Lagrangian points on the other side of the moon.
Yes.
Tourist jaunts to the far side of the moon, and then all of the solar system becomes our backyard, and you're going to have to innovate to make all of that happen. And then once those frontiers are touched and the routines are established, then you cede that to private industry, which then makes a buck off of it. And then the solar system becomes our intellectual and vacation playground.
Well, listen, Hollywood's still all aglow with it, and as an example, The Martian drew in hundreds of millions of dollars. It did very well. That indicates the American public is still very, very interested. So it's just like a lack of a goal. We don't have a goal. Oh, and that interstate system you talked about, we got potholes in it. Potholes.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's the infrastructure. That's a whole other conversation, of course.
Sort of.
I don't know what country this is sometimes when I look around. I'm old enough, maybe as are you, to remember in elementary school they would show these film loops of other countries, and it would be like, United Nations Week or something.
Right.
And you'd see these like third world countries, as they were known back then, where oxen drawing plows driven by people,
right.
Flies were on their faces, the roads were washed out. We had a certain smugness about it. So we're Americans, they need our help. And then here in the 21st century, the economy tanks, the New Orleans floods, bridges collapse,
yes.
Trains collide. And I look at this and say, what country is this? We don't have the tallest buildings anymore. Well, who would have thought that our planes would be flying slower today than at any time throughout the 1960s. I was expecting that today we would have like suborbital flight. You get to Japan in 45 minutes. But no. We used to have the longest tunnels and the longest bridges. And for a while, as a kid, I thought, well, this is just kind of like a peeing contest, of what good is that? And then I realized that if you build the tallest building, you have to innovate to do that because you're doing what no one has done before.
Exactly.
So patents will be awarded. And so the very act of the very audacity of wanting to extend a technological feat, yes, there's pride and some ego involved, but at the end of the day, some new discoveries are made that in essentially every case apply to the rest of society in ways that move our culture and our nation forward.
Okay. Well, I don't think that the decaying infrastructure and our apparent non-interest in space are different. I think it's all wrapped up together. Something
in a malaise.
In a malaise, yes, indeed, a malaise. And we're not fixing things. We're not building things bigger, as you point out. Something has happened to us, and perhaps you ought to be in the business of starting a movement of some kind. I don't know what that would be, but
no. But then I would, as an educator, I'd rather educate people and occasionally enlighten them, so that what the country does is what the electorate wants to do. I don't want to drag people. I don't want to. You'll not see me hitting politicians over the head, no matter what they say, because they're representing an electorate. So if they say something, and it's even if it's like scientifically illiterate and they're gaining votes, that means they're being supported by people who resonate with that science illiteracy. And so as an educator, it's my duty, I think, to alert people of things they might not have known that they should know before they make judgments, before they formulate opinions, before they vote. And then if after I tell them what I think they need to know and they still want to vote for the person, fine. It's a free democracy. That's how it's supposed to work. But I fear that many people are simply unaware of what perhaps they need to know to make informed decisions about the 21st century.
I wouldn't even, if somebody said, well, okay, who do I vote for? So I get exploration, I get money to NASA, we begin moving ahead. There ain't no such candidate.
So who came closest to that candidate was Newt Gingrich back in, was it 2008?
Oh, the moon stuff.
Yeah, he was talking, and people made fun of him, and I'm thinking, and I'm not, I know him. We've met a few times, but I wouldn't count myself among his great supporters or anything. So, nonetheless, he says, let's have moon bases. People mock him for that. And I can tell you that given the state of technology, for him to suggest moon bases is not as crazy as President Kennedy saying, let's walk on the moon at a time when we had no spaceship at all. Think about how big a step that was for Kennedy to say, let's put a man on the moon before the decade is out. Not as big a step as saying, let's put moon bases on the moon now that we already have a space program.
All right, question for you. Are moon bases actually sustainable? Could we do it? Is it just a matter of money?
No, so moon bases, it's an outpost, so you need a supply chain. You're not going to grow anything on the moon.
No, that's what I meant.
You have HAB modules, right?
Yeah.
You have to do what Matt Damon did on Mars. But you're not really living on the moon. You're living on Earth on the moon, right? You're creating a 72-degree habitat with a farm inside. And I would question why you might do that. It seems to me much more fun to just have a quick vacation there and then come back, not try to just live there. I mean, I don't see the point of making that your permanent residence, since it is supremely hostile to human physiology to step outside.
Yes, it is. Immediately so. Yes. But so it would be doable, but the question is why?
Yeah, I would say, definitely have an outpost. Like we have outposts on Antarctica. There are no permanent residents of Antarctica, for example. And by the way, Antarctica is balmier and wetter than Mars. And I don't see people lined up to, live in condominiums in Antarctica. So the same challenge would apply to Mars. You'd have to terraform Mars to make it someplace you want to go hang out. And I don't have a problem with that. We're just nowhere near. We can't predict next week's weather, much less terraform an entire planet and turn it into Earth. So we're a long way. I don't know how long, 100 centuries away, perhaps. Don't know, but
we better find somewhere to live. The way things are going right now, we may need it.
Well, so that's a common argument that, in fact, Stephen Hawking, you're in good company. Stephen Hawking made a similar argument, as did Elon Musk, that we want to be a multi-planet species. in case there's some catastrophe, an asteroid or a virus or nanobots take over. And on the surface, that sounds good, and it makes good newspaper copy and clickbait on the internet. However, if you have the resources, if you have the geoengineering power to terraform Mars, turning it into Earth, then it seems to me that you have the power to deflect an asteroid from hitting Earth in the first place. People say, we're trashing Earth, we need another planet. If you have enough resources to terraform another planet into Earth, you can terraform Earth back into Earth.
That's true.
So I don't agree with the practicality of making humans a double planet species. Because whatever that effort is, it's got to be less to permanently inoculate ourselves from any bad virus, whatever effort that takes. That's got to be easier than shipping 1 billion people to Mars. That's all I'm saying.
Do you worry at all about the possible ramifications of nanotechnology? I've thought a lot about that.
So a couple of things. So you have a way for your brain to enter that conversation. Your ability to build things or to manipulate things or to invent things, that is to create objects, are intimately linked to the size of the tools you're using. So if you are constructing an office building, you're not using tweezers and a microscope. You're using bulldozers, and so the size of the tools are commensurate with the size of the project. So now you have a surgeon operating on your eye. So now the tools have to be small, or on your brain, they have to be even smaller. So now, when you think of nanotechnology, possibly making robots or machines the size of, let's say, human cells, you need tools as small as human cells to make these things.
That's right.
Or you exploit biological molecular activity so that it makes a sort of you deputize molecules in the service of your machines in some way that has not yet been achieved. That'll be the merging of biology and technology. But my point is, if you want to go there, you have to have tools that size. And if you have tools that size, oh my gosh, you could manipulate viruses.
Oh, yes.
You could. That's an extraordinary frontier. And of course, there's a dangerous side.
Oh, yes.
There was a dangerous side when we invented knives, right? You can kill people or you can kill your food. So I'm not saying there aren't hazards, and I'm not saying that we should not have a growth of moral turpitude. Is that the right word, turpitude? Fortitude to accompany such discoveries. But when I pause and reflect on the power we would have over our genome, over our medicines, and how much that could help the human species, I'm not even thinking about what bad it can do. You set up laws and say, thou shalt not do these bad things with this technology. And of course, there'll be bad people who will. You find them and arrest them and put them in jail. Just as there are bad people who will stab you with a knife or shoot you with a gun. You take them and put them in jail. All right? So we'll need laws to grow up alongside it. But there is no doubt that so many of the things that we fall victim to, it's simply because we don't have the tools and the knowledge of how to use such tools, even if we did have them, commensurate with the size of the actual phenomenon going on that we would want to manipulate.
There's just been one big change in the world, Doctor, since what you're talking about now, and that is, back then, we could depend on mutual assured destruction. Somebody pushed the wrong button. Now, we have people in the world the center of their ideology is to bring upon us Armageddon, to start the war of wars that will essentially end everything. So if something gets in their hand that would accomplish that, they don't mind dying. They're ready to give up their life to end it all.
You're right. That was a game changer. And for us stateside, that all changed, of course, on September 11th, where at any minute before September 11th, we would have said to ourselves, yes, negotiate with the terrorists, maybe we will survive.
Yeah.
As long as nobody's surviving, All bets are off.
All right.
That's right.
Good. Hold it right there. Good long break, 7 minutes, and we'll be back. My guest, I am honored to have with me Dr. Neil Degrasse Tyson. You're listening to Midnight in the Desert.
Again, we'll return to them as soon as the musical bumper is complete. So just one moment. We'll be right back.
Coordinate your phalanges and call 1-952-225-5278. That's 1-952-CALL-ART.
It is. We are graced with Dr. Neil Degrasse Tyson this night. I'm Art Bell. He's a fascinating guy. There's no question about it. He does Star Talk. And I should add, that began Sunday, October 25th at 11 o'clock. And it's in that slot. And just to finish up on my thought, in the old days, we were worried about the Russians. They were worried about us. We all knew what would happen if some idiot pushed the button. Today, I somehow imagine, I guess, some guy named Mohammed dressed probably in classy black ISIS attire with a little test tube full of something called gray goo. And, you know, there wouldn't even be a discussion about whether it's a good idea to let it loose or not. They'd just let it loose. Be that quick. So that's what I was talking about, Dr. Tyson. It is verifiably a different world.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the things we need to think of as modern civilization is that if we are going to respect people's belief systems, that's what you would defend in a free society, of course.
Of course.
One of the things that distinguished the United States from so many other countries that came before it or have come since. So the difference, however, is that belief systems are not founded in objective truths. They're founded in personal truths. So it's your personal truth if Jesus is your savior, or if Muhammad is that's your person who is responsible for your spiritual fulfillment.
Sure.
And you go around the world and people have their personal truths. But when it is time to establish governance in a pluralistic society, you cannot create laws based on personal truths if you plan on those laws to govern everyone. So you need to take a step back and say, what are the objective truths that we know about in this world? Well, we have methods and tools to establish objective truth. It's called science. And I've been quoted as saying, as I said, I think once on Bill Maher, that the good thing about science is that it's true whether or not you believe it. So it's something that it applies to everyone.
Right.
You base your laws and your nations and your legislation on that, and that they can protect the freedom you would have to have whatever belief system you want. If you have an entire community of people who do not care if they remain alive,
right,
because they want you to have their belief system, that is a destabilizing force, not only in a nation, but in civilization itself.
Sure is. Sure is. And they wouldn't hesitate for a moment. If they had something like that, they wouldn't even have a discussion about whether it was ethical or not, or a good idea or suicide. They are ready to become martyrs to bring upon the end of the world. And so they would do it. Hopefully nobody who... Go ahead.
You know what I wonder is if, this is more hopeful thinking here, if that kind of attitude and that kind of state of mind is actually incompatible with wielding weapons of the power to actually affect that kind of outcome. Because you have to know how the laws of physics work. You have to, if you want to blow up the world, you have to have, and to study, to learn how to do that. At some point, maybe you'll question the role of your personal beliefs in inflicting it upon other people, no matter what your personal beliefs are, or taking it, or trying to. It's one thing to convince people because you preach to them. It's another thing to bring them on by force. And by the way, many of the successful religions over the years accomplish their success by just such activities, right? We can speak of peaceful Christians today, but there's whole episodes where that was not the case.
Oh.
We all know. And so there was, we're talking about modern society, and post-Dark Ages modern society. And for that to function as we would hope as civilized people, then something's got to give at some point.
Yeah, something will give, all right.
That we can move forward.
Well, as Lennon said, if you could make it so, would there be no religion? I know that's a gotcha question.
I'm a fan of a free society. You can think whatever you want. Just don't require that other people think it as well. Then you've made a dictatorship. And it's no longer a free society that our founding fathers had imagined for us. So I don't run around chasing people and their religion. It's not what I do. And that would be a violation of the freedoms guaranteed all of us in the Constitution. Is the freedom your freedom of speech, and what goes with that is your freedom of thoughts. You have that, whatever you want. But, for example, if, let's say, you have a cult that is afraid of the number 13, okay, what is it, trichodecaphobia? Fine, okay, go ahead. But don't be tasked with designing elevator banks and leaving out the 13th floor of office buildings.
They do.
That shouldn't be your job if that is what you're afraid of.
Yes, indeed. All right, so here's something I'm sure you can warm up to. You are combining pop culture and science in this new TV show, Star Talk, right? I would guess this is what you were talking about earlier, an effort to get people involved. And if it takes pop culture to ease them into science, so be it.
Yeah, I think of it, yes. But I think of it in a slightly nuanced, different way.
Okay.
And that is, I realized over the years that I was doing something that I didn't even know I was doing until I look back and I say, wow, that's what I was doing. And now I can say, like I've known it all along, but really I had to even discover this in myself. What I realized is that if you take science and embed it in pop culture, then it is a ready-made vessel for people to embrace the science.
Right.
Because people already know pop culture. That's the definition of pop culture. For example, 2 weekends ago, I finished watching a movie, and I had a half hour before my next TV show I was watching, and I just started channel surfing, as any red-blooded couch American does. I was channel surfing, and I stumble on the Cincinnati Bengals going into overtime with the Seattle Seahawks. And I said, perfect, I got 30 minutes. It's a 15-minute overtime. Let's just watch. It's something good is going to happen.
Sure.
Something interesting, suspenseful is going to happen. So after the first round of exchange possessions, the Cincinnati Bengals comes in a position of a winning field goal kick. So there it is. It's hiked. The ball goes 42 yards as it tumbles through the air in this long arching trajectory, and it hits the left upright and then deflects into the goalposts for the winning kick. Cincinnati Bengals win by 3. And I looked at that and I said, I got to tweet this. So I get on Twitter, and I say, okay, the winning field goal overtime kick by the Cincinnati Bengals was likely enabled by a third of an inch drift due to the rotation of the earth. And people it blew people's minds. People say, oh my gosh, I didn't. Now, here's the thing. I didn't have to explain what football was. I didn't have to explain a field goal kick or overtime or who the Cincinnati Bengals were. Not everyone is football fluent, but enough people are for that tweet to matter to them. And it got picked up by the sports networks, and everybody was talking about it. And it was no effort for me. I just happened to know what these deflections are. I mean, I did the calculation some time ago, and I just carried it forward into this moment. So in Star Talk, the more I can find ways to embed science in pop culture, I think the more accessible it is to people without dumbing it down. I'm not dumbing anything down.
Right.
I'm telling you like it is.
Sure you are.
Right? Yeah, and so that's the subtle difference. It's not that I'm trying to use it to soften it. I'm using pop culture as this moving vessel that's already coming through your living room, and then the science is for the taking. And that's what it has been. And Star Talk is the television embodiment of that. And of course, it's based on a radio show of the same name that posts 50 times a year. But National Geographic Channel has sort of plucked their 10 favorite guests each season, and that they get lifted up and jump species onto television.
That's amazing. Well, maybe, that's just you walking your walk when you talk about, and I hope it works. I hope it succeeds. What's the response like?
It's been very warm. In fact, the first season this past spring got an Emmy nomination, and I was very flattered by that. It meant that we didn't win, but we got noticed. And, Emmy, you win an Emmy because people in the television professional community vote for it, right? It's a peer award in a sense. Right. It's not a committee. It's not someone up on high. So the fact that it got noticed told me that maybe when you combine the fact of how well Cosmos did appearing on Fox,
sure,
not in the science ghetto channels of the upper dial, but Fox on Sunday night where everybody's home already. When you look at the success of Cosmos and the fact that every morning I wake up and I look, do I have how many Twitter followers? 4.6 million Twitter followers.
That's a lot.
Should I remind these people that I'm an astrophysicist so they can still pull out if they need to? and look at the success of, it's not just me, look at the success of the Big Bang Theory television show. It's the number one show on television in any genre. It's pulling down $330,000 per 30-second commercial. And these are, though they be caricatures, their banter is legitimate science unfolding right before our eyes. And we said earlier in the broadcast, look at the success of The Martian and Interstellar and Gravity. And you have a biopic on an astrophysicist called Stephen Hawking, where the lead actor wins the Academy Award. A biopic on Alan Turing with marquee actor Benedict Cabbage Patch. What's the guy's name?
Well, my point is, all of this should somehow translate, into the American people demanding that the people who represent them start looking again at science, at space, at things
That's a completely rational thought. And I'm thinking, maybe delusionally, that the demographic who knows that are people who are 35 and under. These are the people who grew up with the iPhone and smartphones, and they know what value technology is to them, and they don't want to live without it. And these are the people who didn't necessarily become scientists, but they took science in high school and maybe even in college, and they liked it, and they want more of it, and they want to consume it in one way or another. And so that is the community, in fact, who grew up with Bill Nye, the science guy, in their classroom. Right. And so it's a different approach to science than what an older generation had seen or experienced. And this demographic, however, is not yet old enough to run the country, right? They're just coming into the age of, none of them are on boards yet, but some of them actually are self-made entrepreneur billionaires, right? And they see that. They're one of them. Right? How old is Elon Musk? How old could he possibly be? Or the founder of Twitter or Facebook or of any of these other sort of moguls, really. They all come from that demographic. And they know it's technologically driven. So however delusional I am, I'm thinking that as they move up in the ranks, by the way, they also lead the country in support for social causes, in the sense that if you ask who is a fan, who is do you object to same-sex marriage? Okay, the objection fraction is like 10% or 15% for the 35 and under, and it's like 80% for 65 and over. Right. So there's a definite social trend as well as a scientific technological trend. And look at how many people go to Comic-Con. You've been to San Diego during Comic-Con. You can't even believe it. Hundreds of thousands of people show up there. Yeah. And it was surely began as just a small illustrators conference, decades ago. Now look at what it is. By the way, I've said this before. I have this fear that we have actually been visited by aliens, but they happen to land in San Diego during Comic-Con and nobody noticed.
That's possible. All right. So when I asked about the reaction to Star Talk, it wasn't so much about the awards, though I'm very, very pleased that you came close to getting it. What I meant is, are you getting a lot of emails, I hope, from young people inspired by it?
Yes, there are people, and of course, good news for you as well as others, the fact that people spend time in cars and in fitness centers and other places, the audio medium has previously, I think, was given up for dead a few years back, has risen. The growth of podcasts and ways that people obtain information today may be primarily through just the audio medium. And so there are many people who say, I listen to you on my drive and I listen to you on the treadmill, because each of these shows that go to National Geographic Channel also airs as an audio podcast and on Sirius XM radio as well.
It's roaring back, Doctor. Remember the old days when you'd see a kid going down the street with a transistor radio plastered to his ear? Okay, today they're plastered to hips and pocketbooks, and they're called iPhones and Androids.
Yes, exactly. With a Bluetooth headphone connection, you don't even see the device anymore.
That's right.
So there's no end of communication on this. And by the way, just in case people haven't seen or heard an episode, just if I can spend 15 seconds describing the structure.
Go for it.
I'm the host and I'm a scientist, and my guests are hardly ever scientists. They are hewn from pop culture. And my conversation with them orbits, if I may use the word, all the ways that science has influenced their lives or their livelihood. And that way their fan base gets to see them in just such a conversation. So I'd like to think that Star Talk not only attracts people who know they like science, it also attracts people who don't know that they like science. Or better yet, people who know that they don't like science. And these people, how would you ever get science to them if they didn't simply follow their people wherever they went as a fan of who happens to be my guest? And then the way I make this work is I have a comedian who is a professional stand-up comedian as my co-host, and they provide levity when necessary. And then I bring in, if necessary, an academic expert, because not all the topics I talk about are astrophysics. It could be neuroscience, or it could be philosophy, whatever. I bring in an academic expert, and they provide a sort of a gravity valve. So I have a levity valve and a gravity valve, and I as host, I adjust those valves so that I can hit a consistent delivery of humor, of pop culture, of science, in what I'd like to think of as a tapestry that gets woven during the show, so that at the end of the show, you now have a cozy blanket to cuddle with.
Well, it's apparently working. And that's why I asked you about the emails. Hopefully you're firing people up. We need it. If we don't start pretty soon, I don't know, there could be a sort of a break point where if we don't begin educating people, if people don't dive into math, if they don't become entranced in science, with science rather, it may become too late, and we may not have enough to lead any longer, if we're even leading now. I'm not so sure about that.
You put the nail on the head there, because having led is not a guarantee that you will continue to lead. And, I think we got kind of lazy. We got complacent and lazy because we basically led the world in every metric of scientific and technological advance in the second half of the 20th century. Yes, we were behind the Russians in those checkpoints, but by and large, if you look at the strength of our economy and other factors, it was America's century. And the way we're going, it is so not going to be our century going forward. And if we don't embrace this in just the recitation you gave, in the way that you described it, then some other country will. And, science and technology does not have nationality branded on it. It exists to be discovered in nature. And if we don't do it, somebody else will. And if that's the case, we will dance to the tune that they play.
You bet. Hold on, Doctor. All right, everybody. Dr. Neil deGrasse Tyson is here, and I'm about to open the phone lines. National number 952-225-5278. Skype, of course. We'll do the little shortened talk in a moment. We'll be right back.
And we'll return to them in a moment when the music bumper is complete. I don't know how much of this we'll be able to take before we end up our hour, but we will try to get whatever we can in.
A dialogue sequence with Art Bell. Please coordinate your phalanges and call 1-952-225-5278. That's 1-952-CALL-ART.
Well, okay. This is a very unusual opportunity for you. Dr. Neil deGrasse Tyson is our guest, and if you want to ask any sort of question at all, I guess nothing is really too silly, so you're welcome. And again, our national number is area code 952-225-5278. 952-225-5278 by Skype, of course. In North America, you can reach us on Skype by simply downloading Skype to whatever device you've got. It's free. Skype is free. And then go to add a contact and add us. And you do that by putting in MITD51 in North America, and outside North America, MITD55. And I do have one other question before we go to the phones, and that is this. We covered what the collider was doing with respect to the possibility of a miniature black hole. There's also people that are talking about the possibility, Doctor, of communication with or discovery of another dimension. What do you think? I hope we've still got him. Doctor, are you there? Oh, man, what happened? He should be there. Dr. Tyson. Can you guys hear that? Kind of a weird... Hello, Doctor. I actually heard breathing for a moment. Doctor, are you there? I wonder if he thinks we've got a very long break. That could well be. Do you hear that? You pump it up a little here. So it would do me no good at all, the way I see it, to hang up and redial. If I did that, I'd get a busy signal, right? Very unusual situation. I am very curious, by the way, about that. In other words, if the collider can create a black hole, one would think that it could also perhaps connect with, or at least prove, another dimension, which would be very, very, very interesting. So many questions, and I have no idea at all what's going on here. So I think what I'm going to do is answer a few calls. I swear I can hear him in the background. That is Dr. Tyson, right? Let me explain to you a little bit about broadcast. When we connect with somebody, we actually lock that line. And I have locked, at the beginning of the program, actually, I locked Dr. Tyson's line. Are you there, Doctor? Are you okay, Doctor? I'm starting to worry now about Dr. Tyson. Dr. Neil deGrasse Tyson is there. I guess I can hear movement. So, you hear that?
To me, it sounds like he's typing on the keyboard.
Just sort of marking time. I was going to begin to worry about whether he was actually perhaps ill or something, or even fell asleep. He was back east.
Are you talking about me here?
Oh, hi, Dr. Tyson.
Hello, I just, it went dark for like 5 minutes, and then...
I could hear you.
Ago, I heard your voice.
I could hear... Suddenly...
Well, at this point, I am going to leave them for the evening, because they're probably going to spend several minutes yakking about that. And we are pretty close to the hour point. So that way we will have him with open lines for questions for Mr. Neil deGrasse Tyson when we return to the final clip of it tomorrow night. Let us finish up our last little fight here, and then we'll bring this bad boy to a close so y'all can get off to enjoy your nice rest, or, as I know some of you over in England do watch this live, and then get your day started. Enjoy your day. As always, please make sure you do like, share, and subscribe. Get us to those goals of 5,000 viewers and 1,000 subscribers. So that both Boxing Extras and YouTube will pay attention to us. Ibotta and CoinBase are below to get you $10 free from both of them. And CoinBase and Earn, less than 2-minute lessons, one question quizzes up to $100 crypto. And Ibotta basically pays you back for what you have to do yourself. Buy groceries, buy items, and basically what you need to do, live, play, and work in the world. So until we do get back together tomorrow for day number 78 from day one here, so everyone tell you have a great evening, be kind to one another, may your fights in Dominion always be awesome, and of course make sure you do like, share, and subscribe as we return tomorrow for more as we march on from day one.